Alright, so we'll start with. So as you're having already some exposure on ETL and where exactly we use ETL and all, so I think I can just brief you about the tool part which we are going to work on. If not, let me just quickly touch base that part also. ETL, as you know, it's short form of extraction, transformation and loading, wherein we wanted to transform the data and populate into our target tables. We usually apply this particular logic in order to do our incremental loads and even delta loads, and to transform the data like cleansing or validating the data, and even the new set of data derivations. So all these kinds of stuff we basically approach through our ETL process. Now this particular ETL process, so as we mentioned, that is being achieved through code as well as tools. So see, to achieve the same thing through code and all, it's kind of a complex activity when it is compared to the same thing which you can do or achieve through tools. So to get the same thing done, that is ETL activity, or even the other words, data integration, we have a set of tools available in the market. So among them, Informatica Power Center is most prominent and most powerful tool we have among that set of tools. So let us go ahead and see about Power Center tool, or even to touch base ETL in the sense extraction, transformation and loading.
Yeah, I am comfortable with that.
ETL, right?
Yeah. One question is, does Informatica use any other language? I worked with SSIS where I've used, VB language to write some of the codes.
Okay. See, here also in the Informatica, we will not be writing any code as such, but fundamentals of SQL would help you actually, because when it comes to some advanced level of mapping designs and all, in the performance tuning perspective, whatever the logic we write, to minimize that logic, we write SQL overrides. Okay, so that we can limit the data which we process into Informatica right at the database level itself. So in order to write those SQLs, some fundamental knowledge on SQL would basically help you a lot. So that is the only thing. Some SQL knowledge is required. Other than that, nothing coding and all will be there.
Okay. So when you say performance tuning,
yes,
this Informatica tool, from what I know, is like we will map source and destination, do the transformation using some formulas, etc.
exactly.
And it will create you one project, right? And when you are saying performance tuning of that particular project, how will we go about that? Like, is it like a code will be generated for this particular project or something which we will review and make changes, or how will
no. Okay. See, the performance tuning in Informatica is all that we care about the processing time. Lesser the processing time, higher the performance. So we work towards to make the processing time lesser. Okay, so how do you make the processing time lesser and all? That is the thing where we work on to tune the performance. So there are different aspects how you can bring down the processing time and all. So that is a perspective which we work on here. So again, there will not be any code and code reviews and all, but there are different aspects wherein you'll have to tune that properly, so that the data processing due to that, through that particular phase would take less amount of time.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, is there any option to use Oracle PL SQL in Informatica? Is like you can. Okay.
Yeah. Correct. You can call your database level stored procs and even functions, and even you can write in your customized SQLs also as part of your Informatica processing.
Okay.
Okay, it's just not that only SQL or Oracle. You can work on multiple databases like DB2 and all.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk a bit more about the tool. What is the structure of it and all. See, basically the tool we are going to work on is Power Center, and it is coming from the organization called Informatica. But why? Because there are multiple tools coming from Informatica Corporation. Among them, Power Center is the most popular tool. So that is the reason in generic we refer it as Informatica tool itself. But to be specific, for ETL operations, ETL is the Power Center is the one which we use. Right? So now, Power Center is a server and client architectural tool, wherein you'll be having a centralized server maintaining your repository and all, and that particular server machine will be accessing and do all the development activities from our client end. And also, this is considered as service-oriented architecture as well. Why? Because each and every activity is taken care by a particular service center. So let us see what are the components of server that needs to be understood even from a developer perspective. There are many components which we no need to go and look into it. That would be obviously admin activities. But from a developer perspective, there are three main components that we need to understand, and then we'll go see about the client components. Power Center basically maintains a repository database, and then a couple of services, repository service and integration service. Okay. See, just like SSIS, Informatica is also a Power Center is also a ETL tool. So what do you require as to do your ETL processing and all? You need your source table information, you need your target table information, and then once you have those table definition information in your tool, you create your mappings, how the data needs to be flown. So when you create your mappings, you include your transformation objects, etc. So all this information is nothing but a metadata information, right? You just define how you want it to flow the data. When you run the workflows for these particular definitions, then your actual data is transformed from your source systems to target systems. Now here, Informatica maintains your metadata information. So where it can store that metadata information is, that is where repository database is. Repository database is nothing but a relational database that is maintained by Informatica in order to save the metadata information of the objects. It is basically on top of which particular database you install Informatica. So on that, under a particular schema, you can let the Informatica server create your repository database. Just to show you to get a better understanding, I have installed my Informatica on my Oracle DB.
Okay.
Okay, so here under a schema called InfoUser, I have installed Informatica. So the server has installed all the required list of tables. So all these tables will be accessed by Informatica server itself in order to save metadata information of the objects. Metadata information in the sense the table definitions which we import into tool, and mappings we design, workflows we design, the transformation objects we configure. So it's nothing but all that definition information. Okay. So these tables we don't need to bother about it. All these things is exclusive for Informatica server, which would be using for itself.
Okay.
Now, this is a relational DB created and maintained by Info server to store metadata. Now, that particular database needs to be, yeah.
The command which you wrote right now, is it the Informatica SQL?
No. In the run prompt.
Yeah, yes. Select star from tab, something like that.
And that is SQL only, no? Simple SQL.
Select star from tab.
I just wanted to list out the tables. This is my Oracle database basically.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. The schema under which I am is this particular schema is being used by Informatica server. or
Okay.
Informatica database center. So now that particular centralized database needs to be accessed by all the components of Power Center. So how every component can be able to access that is with the help of repository service. There are multiple components of Power Center. All the components needs to be able to communicate with that repository database. So then only the information from that components can be stored in that database, and also those components can retrieve the information from this centralized database. So to be able to do that communication with the centralized repository database, repository service is the one that helps us to do it. Helps the communication between RepoDB and the components of Power Center.
Yes.
Now, integration service is the main component of Informatica. Why? Because that is the one which helps us to be able to communicate with the external systems. Whenever you design a mapping in your Power Center, saying that the data has to be flown like this from source to target through set of transmissions. That is a design we do, but actually when that particular data is flown as you design in there is where when you run the workflow center. Now when you run the workflow, in order to be able to communicate with your external source systems and external target systems, integration service is the one that helps us to do that communication, right? So what happens is Informatica server will communicate with your source database, pick up the rows, process it, and again communicate with your target database, write them accordingly. So to be able to do this external system communication, integration service is the one that helps us to do it. So it's like helps the communication between infra server and external systems. So these are the main components we need to understand even from a developer point of view, which are mandatory should be server components. Okay.
Okay.
Now let's talk about more about client components which we'll be working on our day-to-day basis. Now as part of client there are two client components basically, developer client and Power Center client. Developer client actually has been introduced from version 9 of Power Center.
Oh, okay.
Developer client has been introduced from version 9 of Power Center. But anyway, this we do not use for our ETL activities.
Okay.
Developer client has a tool called Informatica Developer Tool,
Okay.
which is for your data quality operations, but
Oh.
not for your ETL operations. Okay, so this has been introduced just for our data quality activities, but not for ETL activities. For ETL activities, we'll be using Power Center itself, Power Center client itself.
Okay.
So let us see more about Power Center client. Now when it comes to Power Center client, here we'll be having 4 different components for our client-side development activities. So let us talk more about them now. First one is repository manager, designer, workflow manager, and workflow monitor. Okay? So these are the basic 4 components of our Power Center client. So let me just quickly show you them. So as part of server, as I have server on as part of Informatica, as I have server itself on my machine, you can see server can be accessed through a web application called Informatica Administrator. And when it comes to client, 2 main components, developer client and Power Center client. Developer client has a tool called Informatica Developer. As I have mentioned, that is designed for our data quality operations.
Okay.
And for ETL operations, we have Power Center client. And in the Power Center client, there are 4 different components again: repository manager, designer, workflow manager, and workflow monitor. So let me just give you a brief introduction about each component and what it can do. Repository manager. As the name itself says, it helps us to manage the repository we have. So what you can do is, as part of repository manager, you can create the folders and grant access to them. See, in the Informatica level, the scope is defined in the form of folders. If you are given a folder, you can do all end-to-end activities inside that particular folder. So to be able to create a new folder, you can do that only in your repository manager. In addition to the creation of any new folder, if you wanted to limit the access to that particular folder to a list of users, so that kind of ACL activities, access control list activities also, you can do in your repository manager. Usually, this activity is taken care by again admin teams in the real time. Creation of folders, giving access to them and all is usually done by admin teams, developers. So let me just quickly show you as well. See, first one, this is how repository manager is. So as I have mentioned in here, there is a repository database that needs to be connected from each and every component, right? So from within repository manager, I'll have to connect to my repository. So this is my repository here, as you can see in the left side navigator. I'll connect to that. Once I connect to my repository, I'll be able to see the available folders under it. Right? As you can see, these are the different folders I have available under my repository. So likewise, here, all that you can do is either you can create a new folder and grant access to them. So from the folder menu, you can just go ahead and create. Say I give the name Arvindan, and here in the permissions tab, if you wanted to add a list of users to this particular folder access, I can add in here, and then once done, you can go ahead and right. So now that my folder is created, once the folder is created, we can do the development activities in the rest of the components. So these are the activities you can do as part of first component, that is repository manager. So what we can do, create folders and grant access to them. So these are the limited activities you can do as part of repository manager. And also as mentioned, in the real time, usually this particular activity is taken care by administrative guys. The development work starts from the rest of the three components, that is designer, workflow manager and monitor.
Okay.
So designer is where we do all the development activities. Okay, designer is the only way we do all the development activities. So here in the designer again, there are subcomponents inside it to serve different purposes. So let us quickly just take a look. Source analyzer, target designer, transformation developer, maplet designer and mapping designer. Okay. So let's come to designer. So now that I am in designer. So as mentioned, from each and every client component, we'll have to communicate with the repository database, right? So that then only I can fetch the information available in there. So I'm connecting to it. We can see the available list of folders, and among them I can connect to the folder which I need to work on. And in here on the right side, once the workspace area is available, I can start my development activities. So in here there are 5 different components as I have mentioned: source analyzer, target designer, transformation developer, and then maplet designer and mapping designer. So these are the different components wherein you can use to import your source tables to import your target tables, and once those are created, you can design your mappings. Alright, so I'll not go and in deep. I'll just show the existing things.
What is the difference
So that
between a maplet and
okay. A mapping is the where you design actually from source to target using your transformation objects and all.
okay.
A maplet is an object wherein you can take a set of transformations and all those together can be used as a reusable object in your mappings. Okay. See, there will be individual transformations like this. I think as you are familiar with SSIS, there are also I think you call them as tasks, I guess, in there. Here we call them as transformations. So a set of transformations, if you wanted to reuse them, I mean the transformation logic, which you wanted to reuse them in your multiple mappings, instead of recreating them again and again in your each and every mapping, if you can create those set of transformations as a maplet, so that maplet is basically a reusable object. So you just reuse that maplet in your multiple mappings. So that what happens, what are the underlying transformations inside that maplet can be reused on all those across mappings. Okay. So that's the difference between a maplet and a mapping. Basically, maplet has to be used in a mapping, which actually contains a set of transformations. Okay. So here in the source analyzer, we import the tables which you wanted to consider as sources. Target designer, you have to import the tables which you wanted to consider as targets. Once you import, you will be able to see all those definitions in the navigator here in the left side. Okay. Similarly, targets also. Once you have these required source and targets, you can design your mappings in the mapping designer area, just this way. So the mapping is usually done from column to column, from one transformation column to another transformation column. You signify how the one column data needs to go to another one. And the same mapping also you can see in the navigator again. So basically these are the object information. So this is what you do as part of designer, that is importing your table definitions and creating your mappings, maplets and all. Once this particular design is completed in here, how you wanted to transform the data, then in order to apply this design on your actual databases, you'll have to run a particular workflow for this mapping. Alright? So to create that workflow and to run that workflow, we need to go to the next component of Power Center. So that is Workflow Manager. Okay. You do the design part in your designer using your sources, targets, transformation objects and make them a mapping. A mapping is nothing but a skeleton, which is a metadata information object. In order to apply that particular design part on your actual database and transform the data, we'll have to run a workflow, and to create that workflow and run a workflow, we'll have to use Workflow Manager. Alright, so in the Workflow Manager, let us go ahead and see. So now again, from the Workflow Manager also, this is also one more client component from within which you need to connect to the corresponding database and then start working under it. So
these workflows which are created by different auditors, are they version controlled or something like that? Is there any option for that?
Yeah, the tool is version control. You can do the version controlling. You can do the check-ins, checkouts. Okay. Yeah. Here you can see there is an option called versioning, right? So you can do the check-ins and checkouts. Yeah. So basically workflows are seen like this. You'll be associating the mappings with the workflow, and when you run the workflow, the corresponding mapping information is triggered and the data is flown as per it. Once you start the workflow from within here, the execution part of that particular workflow can be monitored. Workflow Manager is where you create workflows and start workflows. Workflow Monitor is where you can monitor the execution of that particular workflows. It's just not only execution part, monitoring part. You can also get log information if there are any failure informations. So all the troubleshooting activities also you can do as part of your monitor. So let me pull up that one as well.
That monitor also schedules it, or is anything else to schedule?
Scheduling part you can do within workflow manager. So all that configuration activities you can do in your workflow manager activity.
Okay.
Scheduling, creating dependencies, all those things.
Okay.
Okay. Once you start that particular workflow, after every configuration is done, so monitoring part you can do in your monitor.
Okay.
So while monitoring itself, you can get access to the log information, error information, is how many records have been fetched from source, how many are loaded to target, if there are any rejected records, right? So, and what is the throughput? So all this information you can get from monitor. So here you can see the workflows, their status. They have been already, these are the already run workflows.
Okay.
The status of it, they have failed, it shows failed, and here in the bottom you can see the number of records, how many has been fetched, how many have been loaded into each target table, and their throughputs. If there are any errors, the errors will be seen here. So all the monitoring activities and even troubleshooting activities you can do through monitor, and configuration part you can do in workflow manager. So it's like designer is for your development of business logic, and workflow manager is where you wanted to configure your jobs, how you wanted to run, when you wanted to run, and you wanted to configure any dependencies and so on. And once that done, you can start workflows and monitor the same through workflow monitor. So these are the 4 components of Power Center client. First one, repository manager, is mostly not falls under our developer activities. The rest of the 3 things we'll be working on each and every day basis.
So the admin people only does the create profile and give access. That's all.
I mean, as part of repository manager, that is the activity, and apart from that, on server side activities, they will be taking care of many other things, like installations, upgradations, migrations, and even when you come to client side, connection creations, connection object creations. Okay, so all that activities will be done by admin teams.
When you say connection object creation, it is like the connection objects that for the interface.
Exactly. Here in the workflow manager, when you run the workflow for the particular mapping, you'll have to assign the relational connections for the source table and target table.
Yeah,
so
right.
Those connection objects needs to be created by admin teams. So here in the connections, okay,
so
the
developer will be using only the connections which are already created by the admin people.
Correct. In the real time, we will not be given access to create any connections on our own. Those will be taken care by admin.
Okay.
Why? Because whenever you create a connection string value, that connection string would be referring to a file or the ODBC file or TNS file and all. So those TNS files would obviously in our server location. So we will not be able to get any access to server. So to be able to enlist a new server name in those TNS files or ODBC files, so the reason this particular activity is assigned to admin teams. So whenever we want any connection, we need to raise a corresponding request to them so that they'll get it done.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. So that's about a brief intro. I mean, just wanted to show, walk you through what are the things we do and how the things look like.
Okay.
So any other things you wanted me to touch base, or any clarifications?
Will there be any real-time project during the course of the training?
Correct. At the end of the training, I'll be giving you out a demo project, which would be having some kind of 4-dimension tables and 1 fact population and all. It's a simple project, but it's not that simple. In order to complete that project, you require some kind of sound knowledge. So that part of knowledge you will be gaining through this course and all. So at the end of that course, you'll be able to start working on that project and can finish it off.
And will you be covering, data warehousing concepts?
It is divided into 3 modules. Data warehousing module is one, and then basic ETL and advanced ETL.
Okay. So when you say data warehousing, you will be covering the data models, right? I mean the schemas, the star schema, the Snowflake, all those stuff.
I'll be touching base the correct. I'll be touching base the fundamentals of data warehousing. What is a schema? What is a dimension? What is a fact? And so on. So first module is data warehousing. Second is basic ETL, and then third one is advanced ETL. And the sequence I will be taking is, first I will go with basic ETL and then advanced ETL, and after we discuss about all this ETL process, then I will go ahead and explain about data warehousing.
Okay.
Okay. And when it comes to course materials will be shared for each and every topic, each and every transformation also. Very in detail materials are there. So all those can be provided, and even in the installation configuration documents are also there, so which will be shared with you. And during installation, if you require any assistance, so we can also take remote access. Exactly, 9.5. Yeah.
For the server and the client, or how it will be?
Yeah, both server and client. Yeah.
Because in general, when you are a developer, will there be both client and server in our system, or will it be only client, right?
No, obviously, when it is in real time, we'll be installing only client. All that server stuff taken by on the admin guys. But now, as we put on our own machines just for practice, we install server as well on our. Yeah.